Hello and welcome. I call the channel The Jungle Nook, and today in this video I wanted to share with you how I'm making my DIY CO2 units for my aquariums. I'll show exactly what you need to assemble it and how to make it step by step and how to maintain it. At the end of the video we're going to go into the fish room and I will put this into the aquarium that I made it for and show it running, and at that point I'll give you some information that you guys should have before making one of these units and putting it into an aquarium. One of the most important things that we'll be talking about is how to ensure you do not oversaturate your aquarium with CO2, which can be fatal to your fish and other tank mates. So what we got here are two different bottles. The first bottle has a sugar and yeast solution, and as the yeast is consuming the sugar, it's going to ferment, and that's what this foamy layer is that you're looking at. This unit will run for about 5 to 7 weeks before you'll need to replace the sugar solution. But you'll notice that the bottle does get this foamy layer all throughout it. And you got to clean the CO2 before it goes into your tank. So this first bottle is what's producing the CO2. Pressure's going to build, and I have an airline hose up here going through the cap, which only sticks out a little bit. And as the pressure builds, the CO2 will move through this airline, which goes all the way to the bottom of this bottle, which just has water. And as the CO2 travels up through the water, that's what's cleaning your CO2. And then there's another airline hose, which also only sticks out a little bit. And as the pressure builds in this bottle, the CO2 will flow down through this line, through the stop valve, and into a CO2 diffuser. And how this works is, as these larger bubbles are coming down into here, it hits a mesh, a real fine mesh, which turns that one larger bubble into a lot of really small ones. And that's how we will be getting the CO2 into your aquarium. Now, as far as the pressure that builds up in these, I would recommend that you use bottles that were made for carbonated beverages like soda pop. The reason for that, there's two of them. One, these bottles won't distort as the pressure builds, so you don't got to worry about them falling over. But also, the caps are also designed to remain airtight as the pressure builds. And these units are really simple to build and to maintain, and they're very affordable. That's why I'm using them. And to be honest with you, I cannot afford to run CO2 in all the aquariums that I want. These right here are only costing me, after I set them up, I mean, it's costing me about maybe $20, $15 to $20 to set it up originally. The most expensive component is the diffuser that I'm using. I paid about $10 for this at Petco. But after it's set up, every 5 to 7 weeks, I got to change the solution, and it's only costing me about $1 a week to run. So here's everything that I need right here. Here are the two bottles with the caps that came with them. And I drilled the holes out. But if you don't have a drill, you can take a screwdriver and with a lighter or on your stove, just heat the tip up a little bit, and you can just melt a hole. Doing this one-handed, but you can just melt a hole right in there. There's that. You're gonna need some airline hose, a stop valve, the diffuser, and some aquarium safe sealant, some silicone right there. I'm just cutting these hoses on a bit of an angle so I can push them through the hole a little easier on these caps. Now this one's going to go on here. And this one's going to go over here, and this one's going to go all the way down towards the bottom, so it's longer. Now I'm just going to put the silicone on there so that it's a nice secure fit. Now I don't know if you can see it or not, but it does say on there, aquarium safe. I'm using silicone. You do not want to use anything that is mold or mildew resistant. You want it to be just pure silicone. That will be safe for your aquarium. And then what I do is I just give it a little bit of a pull. And for the solution, you'll need sugar, some active dry yeast, and some gelatin. And that's all you need. It's a cup of sugar, a cup of water, about a tablespoon of gelatin. So I'm just warming it up so that all that can dissolve in here. We'll add the yeast later. So it's the sugar that is feeding the yeast. And as the yeast is consuming the sugar, it's not only producing the CO2 that powers the unit, but it's also going to produce alcohol. And that alcohol, the levels are just going to keep going up and up in the sugar solution, and it's going to end up killing the yeast. So that's why the gelatin's in there. We're going to end up putting this in the fridge, and it will solidify, and it will slow down how quickly the yeast can consume the sugar. You're not going to run out of sugar. The yeast is actually going to die from all the alcohol in the water. And that's when it's time to replace the sugar and yeast solution. Just adding that sugar solution right now with the gelatin. Then I'm going to stick this in the fridge to let the gelatin set. And I'm going to fill this up with water. The sugar solution, it's solidified. And now all we're going to do is add that yeast. And I got a cup of lukewarm water. And I'm going to use about a half of a teaspoon of the yeast. Give it a little stir. Put the caps on. And this is the tube that will be going into the tank and attaching to the diffuser. You want to make sure you have a nice even cut when you put it on. And this will go in the tank. There we go. We'll go put this in the tank. This is the fish room. Got a 10-gallon aquarium that we're going to be putting this on right here. Okay, so I've put the unit onto the tank, and there's the diffuser. And as you can see, it's it is making bubbles. But those bubbles are still too large. This diffuser needs to sit in the tank for several hours. And after several hours go by, there will be hundreds of tiny little bubbles that you'll see coming up into the tank. So the reason that most people are putting CO2 in the tank is for their plants. You want quicker, more lush growth, better color to the plants, and sometimes they'll even flower for you. But the CO2, that's just one part of the equation. It's usually the limiting factor in an aquarium is the CO2. But they do also need nutrients and proper lighting. Unless your plants require real high intensity light, you don't have to go out and buy an expensive light for your aquarium. What I'm going to do, because I do believe I have adequate nutrients, I'm just going to increase the amount of time that the light is on. Right now the light's only on for about 8 hours a day. I'm going to change the timer so it's on for 10 hours. The reason I think I have adequate nutrients is I have flu vol stratum for the substrate, and that's very nutrient rich, and it will even leach some nutrients into the water column. As far as oversaturation of the CO2 in the aquarium, what's happening is while photosynthesis is occurring, the plant's absorbing the CO2. If you don't inject CO2 into your aquarium, as soon as you turn your lights on, they use up all that CO2 quite rapidly. And then when the light goes off, the CO2 level starts to increase during the night until the light comes on, and then the whole process starts over. But by injecting the CO2 at night, the levels just keep going up and up and up. I just cleaned out my sponge filter, so I have proper surface agitation right there, so that I know that the oxygen is still going to be sufficient in the tank. If I was using an overflow filter, I may just lower the water level an inch or so, and that will increase the surface agitation. Or another thing that you can do is take a air stone and have that attached to a timer. Have the air pump attached to a timer and have that turn on at night. Those are all some pretty good solutions. So monitor the system at night, especially the first night, second night. Just come in and check periodically. If you notice your fish are gasping up at the top of the tank or look like they're in any kind of distress, immediately remove the CO2 unit and do a water change, a partial water change, and do not reattach that CO2 unit until you put an air stone on a timer or do something else to increase that surface agitation up here. And within just in a couple of hours, there'll be hundreds of bubbles instead of just what's coming up now. They'll be really tiny. There'll be more surface area on those bubbles that will absorb be able to have the CO2 absorbed into the water column. Because once these bubbles reach the surface, all that CO2 in there, it just goes right into the atmosphere. And you'll know when it's time to replace that sugar solution by looking in here. I know it's kind of dark, I don't know if you can see, but those bubbles that are coming up, they'll start to slow down after about 5 weeks. And what I do is I will get I'll get a new bottle with some a new sugar and yeast solution in there with the gelatin, so I can just remove this bottle and immediately put on another bottle, have it all ready. And I'll do that at night because it does take time for the pressure to build up and for this to start working. And then it should be burning just fine by the morning when it needs the CO2.